Imagine unlocking your child's through potential by addressing the root cause of learning and behavioral challenges. Have you ever heard of that? Today, I have an expert that just does that. Lorraine Driscoll is an integrative educational therapist and nutritionist who helps children overcome learning and behavioral obstacles by targeting the root causes. So through reflex integration, rhythmic movement, and you've heard me talking about it, brain integration therapy, Lorraine empowers children to thrive far beyond the limitations. And I'm so excited to have her here today because you know what I believe in, that selective mutism is more than the fear of talking. So without further ado, welcome, Lorraine. Lovely to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
As therapists, as speech and language therapists, we focus on speech, no matter what it is. And for me, is a lot of people say, oh, my child can't talk because he's scared of talking. But we talk about the root causes or the going down and looking at the brain. So how can parents begin to address the root causes of learning or the learning challenges at home?
Yeah. So the first thing that I look at as an integrative educational therapist, because I'm trained in holistic and functional nutrition and health, is looking at the nutrition, looking at how we're nourishing the brain, because I like to, there's sometimes this debate as if does food and nutrition and all of that stuff really affect these functions? And I just like to explain to parents in a really simple way that the brain is just another organ in the body. And so the brain is only going to be as healthy as the rest of the body is. So if you have a really picky eater, which is tied to a lot of the stuff we'll talk about later, but if you have a really picky eater, or there's just other factors going on with gut health and malabsorption, if there's toxicity, that is one of the first things that you want to work on. And without overwhelming people with, a whole lot of nutrition and biochemistry and all of that type of stuff, simple things like just trying to get more nutrition into your child, whether it's just more protein and fat is what I always say, the first thing to start. The brain needs those building blocks, especially when it's developing. And then, getting more veggies to support detoxification, just to give in and to support the gut and so forth. So all of those basics that I think a lot of us know. And then in terms of at home, movement, exercise, right? Nothing builds the brain better than movement. And I feel like it's the biggest hidden secret in education and child development that parents are missing. They're taking their child to this appointment for this problem and this therapist for that problem and so forth. And a lot of it's interconnected and has to do with those lower brain levels, those reflexes and so forth that need that stimulation, that sensory motor input in order to make those new connections and to develop correctly. So I just did a reel recently on my Instagram about how you can access this free product that's going to help regulate your child's nervous system, develop their brain through movement and so forth. It's called Go Outside and Get Them Outside in Nature, jumping on logs or swinging off, tire swings, climbing things, balancing, jumping on the trampoline. All those things are going to help detox. It's going to help develop their vestibular system. It's going to help integrate reflexes. It's usually not enough if there's those issues going on, but it's a really great, simple place for parents to start.
Don't we say that their tummy is our second brain? And when, this part here, the tummy is not quite settled, then how is that then not going to be throughout? Whatever it is here is going to go throughout the body. That's the first thing. And second of all, I feel that, children are very much sitting down a lot. So they're sitting down to learn, they're sitting down at school, or they're with the devices and they're watching far more TV, or they're here and there and everywhere. They're in the car. And, if you live here in Scotland, like me, it rains a lot. But I just think outside, you're absolutely right. It's so important. And the movement is incredible. So, but what early signs should parents look for to identify if a child, for example, would benefit from reflex integration therapy?
So that is to me really obvious now. I can't even go out of my house. And I'm pretty sure you can relate to this, where you can almost see it now, like the slumpy posture, the child who walks on their toes. If you're around a certain child or children enough time, you see the one kid who's constantly spinning. They're looking for that sensory input, so there's a lot of kids who have retained reflexes have mild to moderate to severe issues with coordination, with balance, with posture, with gait, the way they're walking even. And some of them are sensory adverse. Maybe they're the kid who never wants to go out and play sports or do the movement-based things because too much sensory input is overstimulating for them. And so they're avoidant. And then the very obvious things, I have yet to see a child with a learning or behavior difficulty, like whether it's a speech issue, learning, reading, behavior, that doesn't have retained reflexes. Like I always tell parents, I'm willing to put my hand in the fire that your child has retained reflexes based on what you've just told me. Sure enough, we assess and they have retained reflexes. But so when there's reading, writing, focus, attention, language issues, there's almost always reflexes that are retained, that are present. But the more subtle things that get overlooked and people think are separate or not related are those motor issues, postural issues, coordination issues, and so forth. Or like with me, because I do a lot of work with dyslexia and reading and learning issues, it's the kid who they've developed compensations with reading where they have to put their hand like this on their chin or their face, I should say, and then they angle themselves and they're compensating because one eye is stronger than another, or they can't copy from the board. So they develop all of these strange compensations. I remember one little girl could not do her writing unless she was on her belly because her vestibular system was so underdeveloped. At the minute she was sitting up, things just didn't think, there was a lot of breakdown, right? So if your child has these quirks, don't just assume they're quirks. Ask deeper questions of what could be going on in the brain that's causing these breakdowns and so forth.
So let's take children with selective mutism.
Right.
What we often observe is the more than the triple Fs. So, but the first thing is the freeze, fright, flight. But the freeze is very, very common.
Right.
So the moment that they're asked a question or they need to communicate, the nervous system shuts down and they go into that panic mode on the inside, but on the outside, they are literally rigid. So that's the first thing that we see. We notice that when they need to do any exercises, especially at school, so physical education, they tend to avoid. So that's why I say it's not just about the fear of talking. So they are particularly scared to bump onto someone else. Now, I don't want to overgeneralize, but I have a huge clinical knowledge and I see this a lot. But when they're jumping, they look quite different when they're doing the jump. Right. So, a lot of parents say to me, so I'm going to be the devil's advocate on this side, they're just, she's a bit shy and, she's kind of not ready, but, she can run and do stuff. And I'm thinking, it's not quite, there is something there that is not quite integrated. What do you think about this?
100%. I find that, and I get it, because as parents, we just think, well, that's just their personality, yes. And I remember this when my daughter, now she had much more serious issues. I won't get into that life story, but she did have an inflammatory brain illness, an autoimmune illness. And I remember that she had certain behaviors or quirks that I thought were that's just who she is. She does these little ticks. She lifts her shoulders a lot or whatever. And it was only after she healed that all of these things that I thought were part of her personality disappeared. And some of them weren't even troublesome things, like being shy isn't exactly, especially if we're overly shy isn't ideal, but it's not, certainly not a behavior issue like the parent who has to deal with a child who's, full of anger and, defiance and so forth. So it's really easy to overlook certain behaviors and not realize that it's part of what's going on underneath, right? In the deeper layers. So absolutely. Yeah.
So then it comes natural to say, so how does the improving the child's physical and brain integration lead to changes in behavior and then in learning? And I'm going to add again that when a child is particularly anxious, the amygdala becomes an overactive amygdala. And I always say it steals your memory, and they often don't retain what they've learned at school. They don't remember, and they would often say, "Oh, I don't even know if I was there." Okay.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it has a huge impact in their learning, in their communication, and it stops them even in believing in themselves because they kind of feel stupid. That's what older children often say to me.
Yeah. So basically, sorry, what was your question? Can you just reframe that?
So, how does improving a child's physical and brain integration lead to changes?
Yeah. So the way I explain it to parents is you have these lower brain levels. That is the best kept secret in child development. And those lower brain levels need to be really well established. And I like to use the analogy of think of it as a foundation in a house. It's the first thing we build. And we all know if you go house shopping, the minute you see a house with a really bad foundation, you're like, oh, okay, do I really want to buy that money pit? Because you know it's going to be a lot of money and it will cause a lot of problems with the rest of the home and the structure. And so those lower brain levels, if they are well developed, those reflexes integrated, the cerebellum developed and so forth, then all of the other things, I don't like to suggest things magically are going to fall into place, but they really do tend to just fall into place with maybe a little bit more support in those specific areas, like say speech or writing or reading or whatever. And so brain integration therapy are, sensory motor stimulations, they're exercises and so forth that help to develop and strengthen those weak areas in the brain or those underdeveloped areas or the retained reflexes and so forth.
Is there anything that you feel, so you've mentioned about, the balancing and, the walking, your free exercise. Is it something that you can share? Just one little thing, because there is so much that you feel really makes a difference. And that could be an exercise or, that they can try and then they can let us know, just underneath here.
So, okay, it's funny you say that because I happened to be thinking about something else right before I hopped on today. And one thing I'm seeing in my practice more and more, even in the last 5 years, I'm like, what's going on? I don't know if it's like COVID and kids are just sitting way too much because they couldn't go out and so forth, but is severely, severely underdeveloped core strength. They can't do a Superman. Like I assessed a boy 2 days ago and he could not do a Superman for even 10 seconds, probably not even 5. He just was like, I can't. And I was like, no wonder this poor kid is having a hard time with reading and writing and focus, because if you don't have a strong core, you're not going to have eye stability. You're going to have poor focus. You're going to have your vestibular system isn't going to be well developed. You're going to have balance issues. So what I really tell parents is like, let's just start working on their core. For sure, we do other things, in my program, all that stuff, whatever. But if I could say like one thing right now to work on that's going to improve so much is your core. And what's actually been found, you'll appreciate this, is the core is the muscles are connected also to the brain in a way that affects our sense of confidence because it stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and repair. So if you have a child that's like selective mutism, chances are they're going to be walking around more slumped over. That core is going to be, weak. They're going to be, contracted inward. And if we can build that core, release muscular tension in the shoulders and so forth, they're going to have to be able to take fuller breaths of air. That's going to also further activate rest and repair and so forth. And also core is just key for focus, learning, emotional self-regulation, all that stuff. So Supermans, bird dogs, the boat pose from yoga. And I mean, I have kids when I start, their core is so weak, they can't even do those. We have to start off with like, okay, laying on your belly. We're just going to put both arms in front of us straight. And we're going to lift our right arm, keeping it straight off the ground on our left leg. And then we're going to switch. And then we're going to switch. And we're doing what I call the scissors because their core is so weak, they can't do the other things to start. So start wherever you need to build their core. And I do want to caution though, this is not an overnight thing. I had a kid, severely weak core, 8 months later. He's like, oh my gosh, just amazing with all the things, the reading, the focus, the writing, whatever. Mom even said, I can't believe it. He's like not even drawn to video games the way he was. So core strength is so important for the brain. When the core is strong, all the other muscles in the body, even the fine motor, the muscles connected to fine motor skills are, strong as well and are working and are coordinated. So yes, to core.
I absolutely love that. So you will find all the information here in the description below. Tune in and into hear Lorraine's insight on Instagram and on her lovely website, because helping children to reach their full potential is way more than just therapy. And I think that there is a lot to learn. Thank you so much, Lorraine, for being here with me today. Let me know just in the comment below, what is the word that you take away from today? And you know what I say, every day is a new day, but you make your own sunshine. And I'll see you in the next video.
Thank you.
Thank you.